The family home, a space meant to be safe, is too often where life ends in silence. Tonight, we ask why. Welcome to Court of the Crane, where we delve into the patterns behind true crime and the societal currents beneath the headlines. Today, we confront a difficult but crucial question. Why does family violence take such different forms in South Korea and the United States? We'll examine the statistics, explore cultural and structural factors, and discuss recent representative cases, carefully, without naming private individuals and with respect for Korean defamation law and the victims. Our goal isn't sensationalism, it's clarity. Not to shock with details, but to illuminate patterns, how forces like household debt, untreated mental illness, cultural expectations of loyalty, and the design or absence of social safety nets can quietly set the stage for violence within the home. We aim to ask, why does a father in Korea see no way out but to harm the very people he is meant to protect? Why does a husband in the United States turn jealousy or financial strain into lethal rage? By tracing these fault lines, economic, psychological, cultural, and political, we can move beyond isolated cases and start to see systemic risks. And by identifying those risks, we can begin to imagine solutions, stronger caregiver support, more responsive mental health systems, communities that recognize warning signs, and legal frameworks that step in before tragedy strikes. In short, this episode isn't about horror. It's about understanding how tragedies are made and how they might be prevented. Before exploring individual cases, let's first understand the scale of family-involved homicides in both countries. In South Korea, police statistics show that the share of murder suspects who are family rose sharply when counting rules expanded in 2023 to include former spouses and common law partners. That year, 55.1% of murder suspects were family members, 160 out of 290 total. In 2024, that level remained elevated at roughly 47 to 48%, 131 out of 276. And 2025 reporting continues to highlight that about half of suspects are family, an historically high plateau. South Korea isn't alone in facing this crisis. To understand what makes its numbers so stark, we must first place them beside America's. In the United States, the National Incident-Based Reporting System's estimates for 2023 show about 26% of homicide victimizations were perpetuated by family. 12.5% intimate partners and 13.4% other family members, such as parents, children, siblings, or in-laws. The single biggest category overall was outside the family but known to the victim at 38.7%. Firearms were involved in 80% of U.S. homicide victimizations that year. The bottom line is that South Korea's family-involved homicides are nearly double the U.S. proportion. But that headline number only tells part of the story. When we look inside the category of family homicide, the patterns differ sharply between the two countries. In the United States, the majority of family homicides are intimate partner killings, husbands killing wives, wives killing husbands, or ex-partners killing one another. These cases often emerge from escalating domestic violence or custody disputes, financial strain, things like jealousy and infidelity. Firearms play a central role, making moments of anger or control immediately lethal. In South Korea, the profile tilts in another direction. While intimate partner violence exists, a striking portion of family murders involve intergenerational violence. Parents harming adult children, children killing parents, or multi-victim familicides that include elderly relatives, spouses, and children together. Instead of being sparked by jealousy or the breakdown of a marriage, many Korean cases trace back to financial collapse, crushing debt, the burden of elder or child care, and untreated mental illness. So while the raw numbers suggest a similar phenomenon, family turning against family, the shape of that violence diverges. In the US, it's more often intimate and sudden. In Korea, more often intergenerational, premeditated, and linked to economic or social pressures that weigh heavily on the household. In the United States, family homicides are most often intimate partner killings, husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends, or ex-partners trapped in cycles of jealousy, coercion, and abuse. Many are impulsive, erupting in moments of rage over infidelity or the decision to separate. And here, access to firearms changes everything. What might otherwise be just a heated argument can turn instantly, irreversibly lethal. These patterns are not abstract. They're written in names and lives. One of the most infamous examples is the 2018 Watts family murders in Colorado. Christopher Watts killed his pregnant wife and 2 daughters while carrying on an affair and facing mounting financial strain. Prosecutors described his actions as a bid for a fresh start, a chilling example of what criminologists call familicide or family annihilation. The case became a national obsession, in part because of the contrast between the family's outward image and the darkness behind it. But Watts was not an outlier. Research shows that in the US, infidelity, jealousy, and separation appear again and again as triggers in intimate partner homicides. In homicide-suicide cases, jealousy and relationship breakdown are particularly common, especially when the perpetrator is male. Financial stress adds fuel, and firearms provide the means. The numbers confirm the pattern. In 2023, about 26% of all U.S. homicides involved family members. Roughly 12.5% were intimate partner killings, while another 13 to 14% involved parents, children, or siblings. That means nearly half of all U.S. family homicides are between spouses or partners. So the headline numbers are only the beginning. Once we step inside the family category, the pressures shaping violence in each society reveal 2 very different stories. In Korea, the story often looks very different, not driven by intimate betrayal, but by intergenerational and financial pressures. If the US pattern is dominated by intimate partner violence, the Korean pattern shifts the lens to the entire household. Here, family homicide often means intergenerational violence. Parents killing adult children, children killing parents, or cases where multiple generations are wiped out in a single act. To see this pattern clearly, let's look at several recent tragedies that highlight the pressures within the Korean households. On July 20th, 2025, a 62-year-old man fatally shot his 33-year-old son during a family gathering in Songdo, Incheon, using a homemade firearm. The suspect, identified as Mr. A, had been receiving overlapping monthly living expenses totaling 6.4 million won from both his ex-wife and his son between August 2021 and September 2023. Upon discovering the double payments, his ex-wife ceased providing financial support in November 2023. According to the police briefings reported by Mail business newspaper, investigators stated the suspect believed his financial difficulties were the result of a conspiracy between his ex-wife and son. To prepare for the crime, he purchased materials to construct a homemade firearm and conducted test firings at his residence. On the day of the incident, he left the birthday gathering under the pretext of going to a convenience store, but then he returned with the weapon. He shot his son twice, despite the victim's pleas for mercy, and attempted to harm other family members present at the scene. Additionally, police later discovered 15 makeshift explosive devices at his residence in Seoul, which he had prepared to destroy his ex-wife's belongings. More than 100 residents were evacuated while a bomb squad defused the devices. But not all tragedies stem from resentments between generations. Some, like the Yongin case, come from a crushing tide of debt. In a separate incident in Yongin, Gyeonggi Province, a man in his 60s allegedly drugged and strangled 5 family members, including his parents, wife, and 2 daughters, while they slept. The suspect reportedly cited overwhelming debt and a failed business as his motive. The case has drawn attention to the pressures faced by individuals under financial strain and the tragic outcomes that can result when support systems fail. And others, like in Gimpo, reveal how unemployment and family conflict can spiral when no exit seems possible. In Gimpo, a man in his 30s was arrested for killing his parents and brother, reportedly after relentless conflict over his inability to find work. The case highlights the challenges faced by individuals struggling with unemployment and the strain it can place on family relationships. The lack of employment opportunities and societal pressures can lead to feelings of inadequacy and frustration, potentially escalating into tragic outcomes when combined with other stressors. These are not usually the sudden eruptions like we see in American domestic disputes. Instead, they are tragedies that build slowly over years of strain, fueled by debt, resentment, and the crushing weight of caregiving. And in some cases, signs of psychological distress noted by investigators or neighbors, though rarely confirmed by medical evaluation. In many cases, offenders report feeling concerned, ashamed, or unable to seek help, believing that family problems must remain private. They reflect structural pressures. South Korea's household debt remains among the highest in the world. Caregiving for elderly parents is still viewed as a moral obligation rather than a shared social responsibility. And stigma around seeking psychological or psychiatric support discourages many from pursuing help early, according to social welfare experts. So while U.S. cases often pivot on betrayal and control within marriages or partnerships, Korean cases more frequently unfold from family burdens stretch past the breaking point. The result is the same: lives lost to violence at home. But the path to that tragedy is written by very different cultural scripts. We've seen individual tragedies, but what societal forces shape these outcomes? To understand why Korea's family homicide pattern looks so different from the US, we have to look beyond the individual household and into the social scaffolding that surrounds it. The weight of filial obligation is one pillar. Rapid demographic change is another. Add to this the strain of debt, the silence around mental health, and privacy norms that keep problems inside the household, and the stage is set. First, there's the weight of filial obligation. Rooted in Confucian tradition, adult children are expected to support and care for their parents, often financially and physically. That duty can become overwhelming when paired with high living costs, stagnant wages, and the emotional toll of caregiving. Filial piety sets the stage, but debt and aging population pressures often push families towards the breaking point. Second, there's rapid demographic changes. South Korea is one of the fastest aging societies in the world, yet formal social support systems for elder care remain limited. Families, already under financial strain, are left to shoulder those duties alone. Third, economic instability is a reoccurring trigger. South Korea's household debt is among the highest globally, and failure in business or employment carries deep shame. For some, this translates into a sense of total collapse, where harming family members is framed, however tragically, as ending suffering rather than prolonging it. Fourth, mental health stigma plays a critical role. Seeking psychiatric help is still burdened with social shame, and families may resist outside intervention. As a result, long-term depression, resentment, and suicidal ideation can smolder until they erupt violently. Finally, there are privacy norms. Many Korean families view problems inside the home as something to be endured in silence, not shared with neighbors or your friends. This belief delays outside help, whether from social services, police, or community networks, until it's too late. Together, these factors create a climate where family burdens accumulate silently, often invisibly, until a breaking point is reached. That is why South Korea sees not just more family-involved homicides, but a different kind. Killings tied not to sudden jealous rage, but to structural pressures of duty, debt, and at times, unaddressed psychological or emotional strain. By now, the contrast is clear. Both the United States and South Korea record shocking numbers of murders within families. But the shape of those tragedies could hardly be more different. These contrasts remind us the numbers may look similar, but behind them lie two very different cultural scripts. In the United States, family homicide is most often a story of intimate partner violence. Cycles of control, jealousy, and coercion. Infidelity, separation, and arguments frequently act as sparks, while firearms turn conflict into fatal events. These cases are often impulsive, emotionally charged, and concentrated within the couple relationship. In South Korea, family homicide takes another form: intergenerational collapse. Parents killing children, children killing parents, or entire households lost to a single act. The motives are less about betrayal between spouses and more about unbearable financial burdens, caregiving strain, and long suppressed despair. These tragedies often unfold gradually, framed, however tragically, as acts of necessity or escape. Understanding these distinct patterns help us see why interventions must differ, and why a one-size-fits-all approach fails. In the United States, early support for survivors, attention to domestic conflict, and measures to limit access to firearms can prevent impulsive tragedies. In South Korea, timely mental health care, caregiver assistance, and policies that ease financial and familial burdens are key. By comparing these societies, we recognize that while the ultimate harm, death within the family, is universal, the causes and solutions are deeply shaped by culture, economics, and social norms. Family is supposed to be a refuge, a place of trust and protection. When it becomes the site of violence, it exposes fractures in the society around it. In the US, about 1/4 of homicides involve family members, most often intimate partners. Here, domestic conflict, jealousy, and the presence of firearms can turn love into a lethal danger in an instant. In South Korea, nearly half of all murder suspects are family members, but the story is different. These tragedies often involve intergenerational households crushed under debt, caregiving pressures, and the weight of cultural expectations to endure hardship in silence. The violence is rarely sudden. It is the final breaking point of accumulated stress. Understanding these patterns is more than academic. It points to where interventions matter. Early support for survivors in the US, mental health and caregiver assistance in Korea, and policies that reduce the social and financial pressures families carry everywhere. Deaths in the name of family invert our deepest bonds, but by studying the patterns, we can at least see the warning signs and work toward preventing the next tragedy. Thank you for listening to Court of the Crane. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Tell us which cases or topics you want us to dig into next. Because understanding these tragedies isn't just about stories, it's about spotting warning signs, staying aware, and protecting the bonds that should never break.